With Arsenal's form being much improved in 2024, a lot of the players on the fringe side of the squad are not really getting a look in. And one of the fan favourites, Emile Smith Rowe, hasn't quite found his place within the squad or even in the starting 11 since he's come back from injury. But is there actually space for him, and can he push his way into this Arsenal team in the future, or does he have to be sold? Let's get into it. Now, I did a video about a similar topic to this in December, actually 4 months ago, and I was speaking about Smith Rowe being able to potentially get into the side within January and a bit after that. And we saw it against Nottingham Forest when he started, but we haven't really seen it too much other than that. And because Arsenal aren't in things like the Europa League anymore, we're in the Champions League, there's not really any room for Smith Rowe to play, and because we went out of both cups quite quickly. Now, even then, I don't think Emile Smith Rowe would have wanted to just play cup games, because he surely knows his potential a lot more than that. But apparently we got another bid from big clubs such as West Ham and Aston Villa in January, and we've known they've wanted him for a while, especially Aston Villa, who've put multiple bids in for Smith Rowe before. And Smith Rowe is a weird one because he hasn't really produced anything for many years for Arsenal in the Premier League. People still look back to that season where he got 10 Premier League goals, which is very impressive, but it was in COVID and we weren't a very good side. Now, obviously, that does show he is still a good player and has some ability about him, but that was so long ago now. People just expecting him to be able to perform this level and be able to perform that well. Nowadays, I don't think it's the same, despite us obviously being a much superior side. And I think he's a bit of an interesting player because I do think there is roles that he has that necessarily don't suit other players in our squad. He's very good at picking the ball up from deep and running with his dribbling ability through the pitch. Even players like Martin Odegaard, when they now have started to pick the ball up from deeper, prefer to do a little bit of passing movement and open up places rather than just dribbling past the whole team. They're not really direct like that, and Smith Rowe is a very direct player that likes running at the defence by himself, and this could be helpful in very different many ways. And he's also quite good at getting into little half spaces and finding space within, and he's not that bad under pressure. He's pretty good in tight areas. The issue is, to me, I think for one, he is very similar to Fabio Vieira. I think Fabio Vieira is also a bit like that, but Fabio Vieira is a bit more of an output crosser and looks more for the final ball than Smith Rowe. So despite them being slightly a little bit different, I think Fabio Vieira actually suits our team a little bit more, being able to get into elevated positions and do that final ball. But in a different way, I do think Smith Rowe could play a little bit deeper to Vieira because he is someone that is going to be fighting in there, trying to win duels, and he's got more of an opportunity to actually physically beat people out. I know he's not big in stature, but he's a very aggressive player in that sense. Fabio Vieira is more of a technically gifted, flashy sort of player going forward. The fact that they both play in the same position and they're still both waiting for Martin Odegaard to get really injured, it's not really working. I know that's the thing with football. If Martin Odegaard was to get injured, then these two players would get considerable amount of game time, and if the other one was injured, they'd even get more, so you'd actually be playing them. But obviously, because Odegaard's very reliable and hasn't really been injured for us in a while, and he's our captain, so he's going to play every game, they simply aren't just going to get in the team, especially with Odegaard's recent performances. And he has experimented playing Smith Rowe in that 8 role, and I think he works to a considerable level, but you can only really try it against teams that don't want the ball, very lower teams in the Premier League, as we have seen it against the Forests and the Sheffield. And while it is going to take Smith Rowe quite a long time to get into it, I do think some of his cameos have been quite impressive. He's still very good on the ball, his dribbling ability is really good, and he's got brilliant link-up plays. 1-2s are amazing. I love his movement off the ball. From a defensive standpoint, you can't really put him next to Odegaard, I feel like, because we've not got enough defensive cover there. As much as these two will try and run back, they haven't got that physicality. There's someone who's a known defensive midfielder in the right position, so it necessarily doesn't help us in that way, unless you get Rice to do everything, which he definitely can, but I don't think that would be a sure system we'd use going forward, maybe against a really weak side. And I also think Arteta, in a sense, kind of prefers Vieira. It seems like he prefers Vieira's directness, and if you're trying to look for a goal late on in a game, you're probably rather going to bring Vieira on, because he isn't going to faff around with it. He's just trying to get the ball in there and run into the box, while Smith Rowe will want to pick the ball up deeper and try and do things that way. But obviously, if you've got Odegaard on the pitch, you don't really need both of them. And while I think there's always a room for Smith Rowe, I think you can always fit him in. I sort of think it's a bit like the Joe Willock situation. I think Joe Willock's a very good player, but he plays in a role which didn't really suit our midfield. He's a bit of an 8, a bit of a progressive runner, and he likes getting in the box, being quite active and getting in the area when he wants. That's not something that we really needed at the time, especially when we've got a 3 three-man midfield. And if you were to think someone like Havertz is going to do that job anyway, and Willock is not playing the same sort of system and has not got the same height to actually do the same role. And although I think over time you could definitely develop Smith Rowe into a player that could help our system in ways, I don't really want to see him personally on the bench not really playing, especially when he's fit. He's a player that we all know is very injury prone. He's spent a lot of his career out for injuries that have been unfortunate. And I think that's the reason why maybe Vieira was signed in the first place, just to sort of not really care about that problem anymore. Now, I know Smith Rowe's loved by the fans and I think he's a brilliant player, but his injury record and the fact that he's not been able to actually show anyone his ability in the last few years through that, and obviously not being able to get into our team as well, has not really helped him his career. He was playing for England a few years ago, and now you just look, he's so far away from any sort of picture like that you can't even fathom that he actually even played for them at this point. And depth is really important, and of course, like, having Vieira and Smith Rowe would be very good options. They do play a little bit different, and they could be definitely stylistic in games that we could play. Smith Rowe, as a young player that needs to really get out there and wants to probably be at the highest level again, I think he just needs to leave. We considerably could get good money for him, which would also be good for FFP. I know people don't like to hear it, but that is considerably true because he came through our academy. So any money we make on him would be technically profit. We could definitely spend on other players that wouldn't mind necessarily being in that position. And there's a lot of teams in the Premier League that would want him. We've seen links to Brentford, we've seen links to West Ham, Aston Villa. These are good Premier League sides. They're not awful at all. And he could definitely do something for them, I think, in a team that would suit his style a lot more. But I do think he's definitely the weirdest player that we have in that scenario, because I think personally, if we were going to sort our FFP out and get more money from sales from Hell When players, I think that you're most likely going to see Reiss Nelson and Eddie Nketiah guaranteed elite. Now, to me, and I think a lot of people, Eddie Nketiah is pretty much 100% going to go. I can't see him really staying at the club, and there's a lot of teams that also want him. I think showing as well that the money we got for someone like Florian Balogun, and I think Eddie is 100 times better player than Balogun, I think we could get some good money for him, or at least get some good clauses in there that help us in the future, because I think he's a really good Premier League player, but not necessarily good enough for us, or he's going to sit on the bench too much for us and will probably go down the pecking order, and for his own career he should probably leave. And I think Reiss Nelson is a really good option, but it looks like Arsenal are not sure if they're actually going to go in for a striker in the summer, and we might come in for a winger, which I still think we guaranteedly need a right winger to help Saka. Nelson's a brilliant player and has proven that he can play at this level very much. I think even this season his cameos have been very impressive, and I'm not sure if Nelson would necessarily go for too much, but I know a lot of teams are going to want him, so maybe if we get considerable money we might have to sell him as well, because if we bring someone else in and his injury issues continue, then you've got to consider him in the squad. And that's something that really holds against Smith Rowe and Nelson a lot. Their injury records are poor, so it's best probably to sell them for the future. Don't get me wrong, I would love to see Smith Rowe in this team. I'd love to see him working because he's a brilliant player and he came through the academy, so there's obviously going to be a lot of love there. But for his sake, I really want to see him flourish in his career, and I wouldn't want him just sitting on the bench not playing for us, especially when I don't necessarily think it's really suited to him at the moment, even if Odegaard was to get injured. Also, if Arteta not necessarily loves him or doesn't really think he's right fit for the team, I think he should leave for the sake of himself, and I want Smith Rowe to do really well, so I want the best for him. And I think realistically from an Arsenal perspective we can make good money out of him and at least send him off to have a great career like many other youngsters before. But let me know, we've seen crazier comebacks before. Do you think Smith Rowe could have a potential place in our Arsenal squad yet again, or do you think he should be sold in the summer to be able to flourish somewhere else? Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and watch my video yesterday where I talk about why Martin Odegaard is Arsenal's most important player right now. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.